What up, NFT.NYC? Thank you so much. Y'all hyped? Yeah.
What's up, NFT.NYC?
Exactly. Here we go. Well, thank everyone for joining today. I'm Chris Banbury, head of global operations at Complex Network. We've got Richard Li, CEO at 4K, and Bonz R with Weekend Blockchain Games. I think we'll probably just dive right on into it. Bonz did bring some slides today. I think he's got some pretty cool things to talk about. So I think we'll just honestly just kick it off. Like we're going to do a little bit of pitches from our own personal perspectives, and then we'll really dig into some of the aspects we think are pretty cool with gaming and NFTs. So Bonz, I think this is your slide right here. So why don't you just kick it off?
Yeah, thanks, guys. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's going on Wax. There is indeed a revolution in NFT. Wax is right at the forefront of onboarding a lot of players to the Wax or the blockchain gaming space. The value proposition, obviously, of true ownership of in-game items is going to probably bring the next major wave of crypto adoption, NFTs in general. The reason why we build on Wax, before we get to that, there's 300 to 500,000 daily active users playing the games on Wax. That number is growing by the day. The reason why is there's obviously no transaction fees on Wax. That's kind of like a major differentiator between other chains, and obviously for gaming, it's going to be really important. Sorry, guys. There's over 22 million daily transactions happening on Wax. It's like the most used blockchain in the world at this point. It's number one in transactions. So the reason why, obviously, is Wax created in 2018 the Wax Cloud wallet. So it's an all-access wallet. You can basically onboard new people that aren't used to managing their own private keys. You can log on and get a Wax Cloud wallet with social logins like Google, or use your Discord login. That helps to onboard people who are new, which is obviously important. Getting them into the space, there's not a lot of friction to get in a Wax account. And of course, once people are in the ecosystem, they can easily set up a self-managed key account once they're comfortable with that sort of thing. So obviously, easy onboarding is a great way to games on Wax obviously have this advantage of getting people in relatively easy. So I work for Weekend. We produced 3 games on Wax so far. Prospectors, Our Planet, and Tribal Books is still in development. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did with those. And sorry.
All good, good.
So, Prospectors, first ever fully on-chain MMOR. So it's a in-game economy built from the ground up. All the in-game resources are fungible tokens. Yeah.
When can we expect to see that? Is it live now?
So Prospectors, we first launched on EOS, then launched on Wax. This game's been in beta for almost 2 years now. We're about to launch the first Grand Land, we're calling it, on Wax. That game actually launches toward the end of November. So it's a economic strategy game. Like I said, every action is on chain. So even the simple action of taking a tool out is an actual transaction on the blockchain. So of course that wouldn't be possible on any chain that had transaction fees, or without the half-second block times of Wax, it wouldn't even be possible. So we also built Our Planet. We did some interesting stuff with Our Planet. As most people know, free-to-play games, right? Like most of the gaming company's income comes from a small portion of the players. So we started a staking system. So I kind of like to call it proof of collector. So we basically offered, built the first ever NFT staking system. So all the different projects on Wax could come and stake their NFTs on our platform and be earning our in-game tokens. So this basically got all the biggest collectors on Wax to be on our site and using our game token before we had ever launched the game. So then we launched phase 1 of the game. The game token had a utility, so of course it's traded in the marketplace. The second phase of the Our Planet game, which is another interesting thing we kind of did, is so there's lands. These lands are also producing like passive income. You're mining these fungible tokens that are like the minerals of the game. One interesting thing we did was we partnered with the Uplift, which is like the metaverse on Wax. They use Minecraft server. You can upgrade your land on Our Planet, so it also works in our game platform, and it's still producing passive income on our platform, but it also guarantees you land rights in the uplift. So your one NFT is guaranteeing you ownership in 2 completely separate platforms, 2 totally different metaverse. So this is the uplift. This is our, we've partnered with them. This is what the game actually looks like. It's built off Minecraft. Minecraft has, something like 140 million players in the world. I think it's a good idea for people. It's an easy onboarding. A lot of people already know how to build on Minecraft. They've introduced this whole play-to-earn aspect where anybody who comes to your property can actually earn tokens. You can see people built out some pretty elaborate properties. So as everybody in the game is traveling across the map, and if you build a cool structure and people come visit it, you're actually earning tokens from them coming. So it's a cool play-to-earn game using Minecraft, which a lot of people are familiar with. And also BlueDAC. I saw some shout outs for BlueDAC yesterday. So BlueDAC is another one of our partners. They're incentivizing liquidity provision. All these different GameFi platforms and eventually obviously cross-chain, but starting with Wax. It's providing multi-chain and interchain liquidity to thousands of different projects in GameFi and play to earn, where all these game tokens that we're earning, you can then of course you're incentivized, provide liquidity, you're earning the BlueDAC token, and of course they have lots of plans for the DAC going forward in the future. So yeah, that's pretty much what's going on Wax. Thanks guys.
That's pretty awesome, and lots of cool stuff coming out, and really can't wait to check it out. Thanks, Bonz. Exactly, some side out to Bonz there. Cool. So, damn, we got to move on from the time here. So, Richard, please dig into it.
All right. So, what I'm working on is called 4K.com, and what we are is what we say a physical digital bridge. So, bringing physical assets on chain, and that's been really one of the biggest problems, kind of the holy grails, centennial problem, whatever you call it, crypto. And it's, all the previous companies we've talked to have. Really try to focus on real estate, but what we're really bringing on is kind of highly sought after physical assets. And how that relates to gaming, I think, is really compelling. And so what you have is imagine if you could bring something inside a video game. You have a pair of sneakers you want to bring inside your digital avatar. You have art you want to bring into your metaverse. I think that's really compelling. But I guess, we can talk about this a little later, but what if you get more crazy, right? I like to have the crazy ideas. Those are the ones that really work. You look at stuff like Zrun. Who would have thought that would have taken off, right? Who would have thought Axie would have taken off, right? Those were kind of long bets, and that's what I like to see. So one thing I like to talk about later is kind of like Meow DAO. So we can talk about Meow DAO a little bit.
Okay, we'll definitely give you some time to do that. I guess give me a couple of seconds for myself. So like I said, I'm Chris Banbury, head of global operations at Conflux Network. If y'all don't know what Conflux is, we're actually a layer 1 blockchain, EVM compatible, compliant in China. I know that's kind of a weird term, being compliant in China with all the stuff that's going on with the Chinese government. Super interesting. Actually, NFTs, obviously NFT.NYC, NFTs are legal in China to be minted on our public chain. Public chain is very key here. We're starting with enterprise. McDonald's, Oreo cookies are minting on Conflux public chain right now. But kind of moving on to things, I think we'll be moving into retail hopefully pretty soon. And we all hate walled gardens out there. And I think that with WeChat and Web 2 and that kind of stuff, there's China versus the West and whatnot. I think that especially with Conflux being compliant, it's really interesting that we can perhaps use NFTs and gaming as a bridge between worlds. Again, no walled gardens. We're all decentralized out here. We're Web 3, and so it's definitely a potential. Not exists yet, but we're really working towards really using that NFT as a bridge, so people can collaborate between East and West. Something a bit different than Conflux. We all know that Facebook rebranded as Meta recently. Zuckerberg's got this vision for what the metaverse may be. I'm sure many people here have read Snow Crash. Snow Crash, by Stevens in early 90s, I think, was it's a critique on capitalism. So it's kind of don't do this, don't make this. We probably got to think of something different. But Zuckerberg took it at face value. Let's make it. So I'm sure we all don't agree with him particularly out there. So I think we need some decentralized options. And so a really cool project, more of a passion project of mine, is I'm facilitating a class at University of Washington, starting in January of this year. It's actually with the humanities department at University of Washington. So we're really looking at governance is super important. So going to humanities students and thinking humanists and whatnot, we got to be governing from the human perspective. And so how can we emerge governance out of humanities? And then also in addition to humanities students, we're actually going to take STEM and business students, kind of smash them together in this class, and think, how do you interact with the metaverse? Like, this new physical internet that exists out there. And so like, I know we all like VR, AR. I like VR. Like, I got an Oculus Quest 2, super cool and that kind of stuff. But there's got to be different ways to interact, like that don't make you go like straight deep into the metaverse, like Ready Player One or like Zuckerberg's vision. And so like, really, I can't answer this question right now. So that's where you got to go to the people who are going to be using this, like honestly, younger people too, and like to figure out how you can interact beyond just like VR and AR. So I'm really super excited about doing that and, getting this launched and really looking to emerge a metaverse and not like build a metaverse. And of course, decentralized, powered by the people and not by big tech. And cool. That's what I got right there right now. I think we want to jump into a discussion. Like, we all want to use like some of the time to like, talk about some cool stuff we're doing. But a couple of questions here, like really specifically related to gaming. I'll start here. I mean, like maybe Bonz, this might be like something you can, or Richard too, but like Steam versus Epic and their approach to NFTs and blockchain. Because we all know that Steam has, pretty much banned, crypto, NFTs, anything blockchain related, whereas Epic has taken a different stance. Would like to hear your opinions on that.
I think Steam made a huge mistake. So I don't know if any of you guys know about Ultra.io. They're going to basically be launching a Steam competitor. It's going to be the first major platform that's going to be games distribution that's totally embracing the NFT space and play to earn. They're doing awesome things. It's also an USIO chain like Wax, so it's fast, capable to handle the transactions, and I think they're doing some awesome stuff. So check out Ultra.io if you don't know about it.
I like to look at this in kind of a higher level aggregate view, and so. You look at how Steam operates. They've been kind of walled garden. They haven't really built much in the last 10 years. The last game was probably a decade years old. Kind of little innovation. They just kind of have a monopolistic view. And so you compare that to a closed walled garden to something like crypto or decentralization, where it's more like open source community. And so, you kind of look at it like, well, is closed source going to work? Steam going to run it vertically integrated, or it's going to be open source, right? And I think the answer is obvious. And what's interesting right now that in NFT gaming is that everyone is, I think for the majority, the majority of people are looking at it as a very simple simplistic integration. For example, transferring NFTs or transferring value between games or across different type of asset class. I think that's like the first layer. It's like generation 1 layer. And then where it gets really creative, you start thinking about generation 2 layers, even arguably generation 3 layers. And so there are so many more options that open up that are actually available that you cannot do in the traditional Web 2 world that you can do in the Web 3 and the generation 2 layer, generation 3 layer. And so we're at still the Gen 1. We're just trying to get these assets, these gaming assets, to actually kind of work or interoperate or be able to move value in and out of dollars or some form of value transfer, medium of transfer. But when we start seeing the Gen 2 applications being built on top of it, where you essentially build as an ecosystem, kind of like, think of like, let's say Ultra or like Steam or Epic or these gaming centers are essentially layer 1s. And so when you have these layer 1s built on, you have all of these productization on top of it, composability, all of these things kind of get built on top of it. And I don't think that these companies that are really in this space are kind of paying attention to it. And it's not of their fault at all. They just don't have crypto native people on their team. That's really it. Like, I talk to these companies all the time, and they're like, okay, I guess we'll just issue some NFTs, and that's kind of the response. But they need someone that's like super crypto native, who has a long-term vision, who's able to come in there and do it. And what we've seen too is these companies coming into crypto and actually just acquiring companies, paying significantly above market value just to acquire the talent to be able to handle or have the vision to build this out. And so what gets me excited about Steam versus Epic or whoever does it is really not just the generation 1 kind of basic Steam-like store. What's really interesting to me is a generation 1 platform in which we can build composability and other really products on top of it and really create leverage or balloon up what is available in the ecosystem.
Cool. You actually talked about like composability, like interoperability is super key. Like, there's tons of cool blockchains out there, a lot of layer 1s that EVM compatible or whatever. Like, what about interoperability between like bridges and whatnot? Like, as it exists now, we got token bridges, pretty ubiquitous, like moving just wrapping tokens, like moving from one chain to another and whatnot, but does not include metadata or NFTs. And so like, where do we see that going? And like, is that soon? Or like, what do you think on that?
Well, I look at this, right? It's just a function of time. So how I look at this is, I know you guys do that. You guys do that more more than us. But how I look at this is it's inevitable. So interoperability is absolutely inevitable. It's just a function of time. So you'll be able to move your chain across assets. There'll be siloed verticals, kind of like if you think Apple is kind of a siloed vertical, and then you have all open source like Android and stuff like that. That's how it's going to turn like. And eventually, anywhere from IBC is kind of launching on Cosmos, Polkadot is just kind of getting ramped up. Eventually, all of these blockchains, for the most part, is going to be a race down to zero. So what I mean by that is transaction fees will be free or negligible or less than sub-penny, like Solana is sub-penny, and eventually they'll all be somewhat interoperable with each other. So you'll be able to move transfer value from one chain to another as soon as these bridges get built. Now, these bridges are very difficult to build. They take a lot of engineering. They're very skilled people. For example, my previous company was the one that built the Solana Ethereum bridge, Wormhole, if you guys are familiar with that. And let's say that is no joke to build, extremely, extremely difficult. But to me, in the vision of the future is that you'll be able to transfer these across any chains. They'll be, easily, accept on this chain, that chain, whichever one you want to work with, whichever community you believe in on a philosophical level is where you want to be, based upon. And so I think that's some of the interoperability stuff.
Yeah, super important. I think we're talking about interoperability between not only tech but cultures and ecosystems. Like one of those mentioned conflicts in there a little bit again, because we don't want walled gardens, we don't want China versus the West, and interoperability with NFTs is going to be super cool. Really think it's quite important. So for people if they want to interact with the Chinese general public, potentially these metadata bridges to do NFTs on Conflux and then back and forth between different ecosystems. So different use cases for different cultures and technologies. Bonz, do you want to say anything on this interoperability?
Yeah, like Richard said, it's early, but it's all happening. Of course, that's the future. All the chains will be interoperable. As far as what we've done, we actually were one of the first chains to one of the first projects to actually utilize some IBC within the USIO chain. So like I had mentioned before, we launched Prospectors on EOS first, and then we launched on Wax, which are two separate USIO chains. But you're able to actually move in-game items, tools, whatever. You can send it on the train. You send it from EOS over to Wax or vice versa, and be able to use the same game item with the same life left or the same tools or the same whatever, and send it to the other chain and have your characters using it on that chain. So, but yeah, like Richard said, it's early, but it's all happening, and it's complicated, especially when you start talking about completely separate techs.
Exactly. You got a pixelated Minecraft sword that you want to use in Fortnite or something like that. It's super hard to transfer that asset actually.
Right. Why? As I played a lot of video games growing up, I'm sure a lot of people in this crowd have. I didn't play World of Warcraft. Played a lot of EVE Online. Almost went pro in Dota 2. But one of my biggest thing was, wouldn't it be cool if we could interact with DeFi with the gaming assets? We need that. If I could, have a weapon, legendary weapon in World of Warcraft, and collateralize, get a loan against it, I can fractionalize it, I can bring it to other video games, I can transfer from World of Warcraft to EVE Online. I think that's the basic implementation of it, and I think we're 3 to 5 years away from that. That's what I say, basic implementation, not let alone building on top of that.
Yeah, so you actually brought up NFTs and gaming and DeFi. I'd like to talk, I'd actually like to dig a little bit more into that. So what are some of the things that we see out there? It's how can, I guess, I'm just kind of generalizing here, play to earn, you get these, you spend your time, you get NFTs within the game, and how can you, use that, gain liquidity on these? How can you earn more, yield farm? What do you guys think about the future of, DeFi and NFTs and gaming?
So I think that there will be really two type of markets in the future for gaming. There will be one that people play for entertainment purposes, for example, or competitive purposes, Call of Duty or StarCraft 2. And then there will be an entire new genre of games where people are playing A, to live their digital lives, or B, to make money on. And so if you see Axie, which I think was quoted as the fastest growing tech company of all time, I believe, ever, and most people outside crypto have no idea what it is. Right. And so people are going to, based upon their entire livelihoods inside of these video games. And you could do that. Before crypto, there was, you had to be in the top 0.001% to make any type of money. We're not talking a lot. I could tell you on EVE Online, I was one of the, most successful people in that video game. And I converted all my money in the video game into Bitcoin, actually, and started my first company with it. But I was one of the top wealthiest people in the game, and I probably only had $70,000 US, right? But you see Axie and these things really taking off, and in the future, people will be living. They'll go to work, they'll go to inside the video game, farm around, do some trades, run some alliances, play some games, then they'll go back and they'll make that money, and they'll be able to pay for their livelihoods. That's where we're going to head towards. And then there's going to be the next one, and the next one. There'll be many iterations of this, and then when you bring in DeFi into that makes it much more interesting, because without DeFi, all of these assets are one-to-one, unproductive, unleveraged capital. And so what I mean by that is like 4K, we deal with like luxury assets. So starting with luxury assets like Rolexes. A Rolex sits on your shelf. It's unproductive, unleveraged asset. It's very similar to a highly sought after weapon or sword in a video game, right? Unproductive, unleveraged assets. Now you bring that to DeFi. You start getting yield farming. You start to get into liquidity pools. You start getting AMMs. You start doing all of that. What's really interesting to me is like the ability to do like loot boxes. Loot boxes and microtransactions is how these games make money. Why not do loot boxes on like a USDC Uniswap pool? Why not make it, something like that, as opposed to, going in there and buying a loot box for $250 anytime. Let's say they only drop 100 of them and they put on the USDC Uniswap pool, and then they also get recur on the secondary market transactions. To me, that is where the transition is slowly going towards. I just think that we're so early that it'll be in 5 years maybe that stuff happens. But I think offering models like that where there's this exclusivity and also having the price discovery and the liquidity is going to be absolutely key to really, grow the denominated value captured within these type of games. We're not talking like right now just 1x. You got to bring up to 10x. Or we do mortgages, which is like 33x. But that's what's needed.
Cool.
Yeah, a few of the interesting things that I see going on right now are, of course, Richard talked about renting game items. Of course, that's already even starting to happen. I see a lot of games that are utilizing land ownership. And of course, what comes on those lands and the tokens and the mining aspect or renting out those lands. Alien Worlds is a good example on Wax. Prospectors also you're renting a land, whatever's on that land you have access to. You own those rights to those resources. But yeah, like Richard said, it's still very early. DeFi there's a lot obviously happening and there's a lot going to happen. I saw. There's a game coming on Solana where you're literally walking around. It's like 3D metaverse style, and it's completely based on DeFi. Like you're farming in the game, and it's real farming. There's a lot of these farming games that are coming now, and I think the whole play to earn aspect is like I said at the beginning of the talk, is definitely going to drive the next wave of adoption. Obviously, if you have billions of people playing games, and once people realize that their time can be spent, and like Richard was saying, you put all this time into a video game, obviously you want to be able to be compensated for that time. If you have the choice to be compensated or not compensated, you're going to play the game where you can earn. So yeah, obviously the future is bright for blockchain gaming.
Cool. Because moving on here, like some unique use cases, I think, Richard talked a lot about bridging the physical to the virtual digital, which is like where we're going. That's the metaverse right there, physical internet. I think you brought it before, like some really interesting kind of like, farming stuff, like with pets and cool things
yeah,
like that.
So I was joking about this idea for some time now, and I was like, because what 4K does is bring physical assets into the metaverse or the digital world. And, what if I'm sure if people are familiar with Zed-Run, like what if we NFT'd a real-life racing horse and then brought him into Zed-Run so you could race, breed, and actually interact with it. And then, let's say something happens to the horse that causes this cascading economic effect in the video game. And the second part to that is, I was joking, we call it Meow DAO, in which, let's say we take an example. We go out and rescue 100 cats, so, PETA is on us. We build like a cat paradise. We live stream it to Twitch with 100 cameras, and then you NFT each cat. And then you can bring the cat and you sign a deal with Axie or CryptoKitties, whatever game is out there. You bring the cats into the video game. They start breeding and merging and doing other things, interacting in the game. And I guarantee you, if that happens, you'll have the first like $10 million cat. And that's what's really interesting is that for the first time, you're able to bring physical world or physical manifestations into the digital space. And this is why the NFT is the perfect vehicle. Before NFTs, what could you do, like a QR code, an NFC chip? There was no vehicle to do that. And so I think this is going to be happening. I call this reverse Tamagotchi. There's going to be a profession in the future in which you wake up, you kind of farm, like tender your like real life cat farm or your ape farm or your doggy DAO farm. And then you go in and you make your money and you pay for all your real life expenses with that. And you become really famous, kind of like the Peloton people. And I totally see this happening. If anybody wants to do it, please reach out to me.
You want to create a zoo too, I think.
Zoo DAO.
But exactly. Yeah, exactly. Cool.
Zoo DAO.
I think this kind of Bonds, like what's maybe some like I don't think maybe like percolated in your mind that maybe like forward thinking, something that's doesn't exist right now. Like what would you like to see? I know I'm all about metaverse, like competing with Zuck and powering the people. Like what about you? What are you thinking these days?
Yeah, I'm really interested to see this whole metaverse space manifest. Like this is obviously huge. Seeing Zuck making the announcement a few weeks ago that they're now going all in. Yeah, it's going to be huge. Obviously, tying all these metaverses together and how how that the inter blockchain communication and which blockchains will actually use, or which NFTs where they'll be minted. I find that all really interesting. I know Zuck specifically even mentioned using ETH. I'll be really interested to see how they actually plug in to whatever standard they're going to use for NFTs. But yeah, like obviously the metaverse space and those in-game items and what you're able to bring into the metaverse. I think we're obviously seeing all these things sort of tied together with like Richard was saying, the real life items. You have all these fashion items, right? And I think obviously we all realize that being able to flex your designer or whatever, or have those heady Nikes or whatever watch, like that's what people are going to be rocking in these metaverses. And there's obviously the market for that is going to be absolutely enormous. All these name brands, of course, are going to want to be represented there, and so I can only imagine the flood of money that's going to come in when everyone's wanting to flex their high-end items in the metaverse.
Straight up. So honestly, we all know that Second Life exists out there, and this was I don't know how many years ago this was. And so was it just too early for Second Life? Because obviously brands went deep into Second Life, but nothing really particularly came out of it. So was it just bad timing where we weren't ready yet, or not blockchain perhaps? That could have been the blockchain is the key here. So any thoughts on Second Life? And I know they have some new things coming out too, but on that.
I mean, I was on there for a little bit. I like to think of that as the equivalent to pets.com. They were just a little early, they're like the beta testers. And, we saw, if you look at Second Life, you're like, this is inevitable. The Matrix is arguably inevitable, right? And so you look at that, you're like, wow, this is a great glimpse of the future. But the tech wasn't quite there yet. It's just really early. It's kind of the first wave, kind of like Bitcoin is Gen 1 technology. And then now we're finally seeing the Gen 2 come out, which is lags it by 20 years, which is generally what the trend is, right? You look at all the early tech companies, pets.com didn't work. Now it's massive. And so, eventually, I think, when you talk about Meta and Facebook, it's do you really want a metaverse that's controlled by Facebook? Come on, doesn't seem like a really good idea here. So I think that, kind of an open source kind of approach would be really interesting. But I just really wish that more people working on the metaverse. I honestly don't see that many people working on it. I wish more people left Facebook to actually build their own open source version of the metaverse. I wish there was just more developer adoption and more people interested in this, as opposed to super centralized authorities kind of coming in here dictating what the metaverse will eventually look like.
Exactly. We're all about that there. I think we're almost done with time here. Is there anything you guys wanted to bring up before we're off the stage?
Chris, didn't you want to tell us about the DAO you're working on?
Well, I did mention that, but honestly, I just wanted to be emergent, from the people, honestly, starting with University of Washington, humanities, STEM, business smashed together and something cool and kind of figure out what we work with. But honestly, I just want to use the term emergent again, because don't want to design it and here, this is what you got. Want the people to determine what they want and then make that happen. So I just want to make one point with that though. It's no one wants, it doesn't, we don't want Facebook necessarily to not exist or Meta to not exist. They can be part of a greater decentralized ecosystem. This shouldn't be the whole ecosystem themselves.
I can leave off with one thought that comes related to gaming a little bit. So for example, FaZe Clan, which is one of the biggest esports teams in the world, has more fan base than the Dallas Cowboys and New York Yankees combined. That's the #1 football team and #1 baseball team in the world. Yet the revenue per fan is less than $3. Yet the NFL teams like Dallas Cowboys, revenue fans to $65 per annum basis. And so what we have is massive adoption, but zero ability to monetization. And I think tokens and NFTs are going to be the way that teams, games, and everybody monetizes. And it's just really early on, but with something like Axie, you kind of see that really just taking off.
Yeah, well said, man.
I think we're out of time. Thank you very much. Let's build the future.
Right on, right on.